they sort of uncovered a lot of like how does the mind and the nervous system actually operate in terms of how do we create what we this future, imagined future and imagined past, and and their approach was sort of to find ways in a way to hack that so that you can change what your system has stored as a traumatic memory. If you can uncover what are the codes that are used by the system to signify this is traumatic. For instance, that can be something with the color or the sound or the size, these distortions. Then you can, and if you can also find out what is a happy memory, then you can actually go in and change the codes that are saved along with the memory to change it from a traumatic memory to a happy memory. That's like one basic way of saying it. And as part of that, what they did was they really went deep into looking at what's called submodalities, which is the way things are stored in our system. Um, Stuff like what I just talked about: color, distance, size, uh, what's it called? How sharp the image is, the sound side, like what kind. So all these things, when you replay it, is there a frame around it, or is it full? Is it moving? Is it still images? And so as part of my sort of training in NLP, I got very used to both in myself uncovering this and also with clients helping them uncover what are the modalities that they're. So then when you get into the work and you look at question three, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? Instead of having these high level, I get annoyed or I see images of the past or whatever, this allows me to get very close to exactly what kind of images are you seeing and how are these images impacting you. So I already had that like deep training into looking very closely at the nervous system and what we're doing in question three and four. And that proved to be very helpful, especially in the sort of style I have in the work, which emphasizes being with and allowing the experience to have some space in you. It's not just an observation thing; it's also an experiential thing. And using these ways of observing ourselves is helpful in then stepping into the experience as well. So I can sort of ask very, very specific questions and thereby help people step fully into the experience, which I have come to find is very important for the work to actually have a deep impact.
Hmm. Cool. Very cool. I don't know. I was skipping around a little bit at reading your on your webpage about so your story is you're you had a family already. You were in university and went into the conventional corporate world, but not that interesting to you. And you said that what you were really most interested in was existence, and I'm paraphrasing, but the nature of the mind and the heart, and these classically spiritual questions. And so you decided to dive into that professionally. And I'm always so curious when someone settles on the work, and and you are into other things too. I get that, and I'm just curious of how what briefly what your journey was as you were investigating these questions and how it led you to the work and why you've really stuck with that.
I was deep into the spiritual stuff quite early on and was really uncovering and exploring a lot of different modalities and belief systems and philosophies, religions, all kinds of stuff, practices. And along the way, I sort of got this sense that there's a lot here that is being taught, but we don't really know if it's true. Like, is this real or not? You know, especially, the more esoteric stuff like Atlantis or star people or, all of this stuff that's all jumbled into this whole spiritual new agey approach. This was in the 90s. So at some point I sort of stopped and asked, what do we know to be true? Like, what is actually true here and what is just speculation? What's the difference? And what can be useful, like what can actually be put to use, and what is just knowledge for the sake of knowledge. And in that sort of purge of my mind, we could say, there were a couple of things that I landed on. One was that being present was like the core uh, teaching or the core ability or what it was all could be boiled down to. Being present in the moment seemed to be the key to everything in a way. And then the other thing was uh, I got really interested in tools and methods and specific ways to impact and change and sort of allow us to become more present, and which involves, working on some of the trauma related stuff that takes us out of the present moment and into the past or into the future. So my sort of the sense I got was the more we can um, release or clear up or whatever we want to call it of this stuff, the more we can just naturally gravitate towards the present moment. And so I got really interested in tools on the one hand, and on the other hand, these thoughts became a book, and that book became my first book, being present in the now, which then became a bestseller. So I that was why I could start my business. And in that process, I was contacted by people who were saying, "Oh, you should check this out, or you should check that out," or and one of the contacts I got was about the work. And so I checked that out. I read Katie's book, and I remember that I liked it. I remember I did the exercises that were there, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. I like it. But I didn't see that it was more than just another tool in the many tools that I was confronted with. And to me, it had a bit of an intellectual side to it, and it was nice, but it was a little heady, perhaps. And then so I put that aside, and then I kept, and then among other things, I got into NLP, which is a very tool-oriented method. And then in that journey, I sort of revisited the work, but now suddenly YouTube had appeared and I could actually see Katie do the work. I think at that time, actually, it wasn't even YouTube, it was just audio, I think. But there were these on the internet, somehow there was the possibility to experience it. And when I heard her do it, I realized, okay, this is not just another tool. This is something completely different, because it combined the tool aspect with a very deep spirituality. Like, there's no limit to how deep you can go in the work, in my experience. So it both has this very hands-on kind of approach with a very simple procedure that can be combined with infinite depth in a way. And I really like that combo. So I started, experimenting with that myself, and I just, yeah, it just felt so right to me. And then I went for my first school for the work, and then the rest is history. I was blown away by that, and yeah, I've been doing the work ever since, and became a certified facilitator over time. And it still is the backbone of what I do. I've added a lot of other things on top, and I think I have sort of a pretty good soup of different ways that are all centered around inquiry and relating. And I've also found some areas where I don't think the work is as strong as other things, and so I like to combine them and support that if that's what the client needs. Um, and yeah, and so that's what I've been doing ever since. And by now that's been what, at least 15 years, probably more of being really deep into that, like the self-inquiry, which to me seems like the best of them all. Like, self-inquiry is seems to me the most balanced, like ecological, healthy, safe, and effective way to work with your mind.
Yeah, I like that. Ecological. I never threw that in there. But yeah, so and out of curiosity, do you, can you identify, was there a moment listening to Katie or watching Katie where you kind of got that this was much bigger ball game than?
No, I don't remember those parts. I remember my curiosity really being piqued, and I think what then really got me was I was when I was doing it myself, and I really felt like some deep shifts. I don't remember what they were on anymore, but I remember walking. I would walk. I had a dog at the time, and I would walk the dog around a lake where we lived, and then I would do the work while I was basically just doing the work all the time, and I was doing it while I was walking, and there I had some very deep sessions with myself. I was just doing it on my own in the beginning, and there I remember just some things clearing up, and even today when I do trainings on the work, which I do quite often, that's one of my focus points with my participants, that I try to make sure that everyone experiences that shift, because that's what really hooks you on the work. when you suddenly feel a turnaround just become more true and the original thought drop away, that's when you get that's like then you're hooked, because then you get what it's about. Then it's no longer just this intellectual idea of understanding or exploring. Then it's really like, wow, this is so powerful. And so I'm usually focused on either they have it with when they work in pairs, and if someone doesn't quite get it that way, then I will try to make it so that I get to work with them, so that I get to support them through such a shift if I can. Because I know if they leave my training having tried that, then they will want to pursue the work. And if they haven't, then there is a high risk that it'll just be like, oh, that was interesting, and I got something out of that, and then it'll just drop away. Because that was my own experience also. So yeah. So that was what really got me. It was like when I experienced my first shift. It was like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah, and that shift comes in through your writing too. You know, uh, you talk about it, and I'll quote it here, hopefully in a little bit. But you really emphasize that it's not the intellectual understanding or knowledge; it's the experience that shifts us. And so, yeah, that's what you're talking about. And I'm fully on board, and I love hearing about that. And I hadn't really grounded that myself. Right. It's like, especially these days, there's a new spiritual retreat or new tool every day, every minute on YouTube, and you kind of you can get into this thing where it's just like a weekend warrior kind of thing, where you don't really stick with anything. It's just you pick it up and like, oh, that was neat, and then kind of go back to your old ways till you find the next shiny object and pick that up. And yeah, and yeah, I'm with it. Can when I started it, it was really just a trauma relief. It was psychological, um, and I I did that. It was on a heartbreak, and did the work for about a year, and had great results. It was like psychological, therapeutic. And when I went to a 3-day retreat, the Byron Katie cleanse, New Year's cleanse, it's just the repetition of hearing her say, "Is it true?" again and again and again. And I remember waking up, and I wasn't sleeping much because it's like those 3 days are just like go, go, go. So I was a, I was a little short on sleep, so the veil was a little thin. And I remember waking up, and my first thought of the day before even that I was a human or I was on planet Earth, all the kind of baseline data that needs to fill in so you can get started was just the was just the thought, is it true? And that was a moment for me where, and I just started laughing because it was, is it true? Is like, is this, true?
Yeah, two thoughts if I can share. Yeah, so one is I think there's something very unique about uh, not just hearing Katie repeat this question so many times, but also being confronted with like how much of a question mark she is herself. There's something about how like the approach she brings that for me questions more than I even thought it was possible to question. And I don't think I really got that until until I experienced her and really experienced how fundamentally she is just a question, or like, yeah, is it true to everything, even am I human, or similar things, right? So there's something about being in her presence I think is very unique and a huge benefit, and I feel very privileged that I got to live on in a part of the world at the same time as someone who so fundamentally has shifted something in her own experience, so she could be like a mirror or a role model for me to, oh, it's actually possible to question that. And I think that's also part of what I do in my trainings is, and even with my one-on-one clients, I bring, some challenges sometimes to some things that are taken for granted. And I think that's part of, so there's holding the space for the other person and asking the questions and being like a safe container, but there's also sometimes bringing from your own experience a story or an understanding or a question, like really honestly, that invites people to question even deeper things than they thought, just like you described, right? Am I human? Is it true? And like to even consider questioning that requires like uh, yeah, being exposed to the possibility that it can be questioned, right? That it could just be a thought. So that was one thing. And the other thing I thought was you described this weekend warrior thing, and I think there are like two ways because there are a lot of retreats, and I think they can become this strain. Our unconscious or our higher self or our soul, whatever you want to call it, can sort of create a journey through a number of different experiences and modalities that still has like a through line because you're working on your thing and you're bringing yourself every time, and then it's breath work, and then it's whatever psychedelics, and then it's the work, and then it's IFS, or and you go through processes and they all go together, and some of the retreats are only intended to do that. And then there's another thing, which is these different practices, of which the work is one, and there are many different practices. And if you choose a practice, then it really benefits that you stay with it, so that you really get it under your skin, or get under the hood, and get and reap the benefit. And that can require some patience and some time to go deeper with it. So in that way, I think that this retreat jumping can have a positive, but that's more in your individual journey of the moment. And then there's actually learning the skill set or the tool of a particular practice. And that's a more dedicated thing. And with the work, I would say, like it's sometimes a more bitter medicine, and why some people will prefer to move on to something else. It requires something of you to actually sit there and meditate on what's painful. It's not just a feel good journey, even if the benefits you reap are so tremendous, but it takes going through a little fire sometimes.
My story is that at least for men, it's like we don't do it until we're suffering enough to you know at least in my eh, for me it was that I had a spiritual practice and I was religious with it, and I just was living under the assumption that it was the best one until it just until I was suffering enough and it wasn't taking care of it and I needed help. And only then was I even open. In fact, I had learned about the work. I had read the process in 2008. My stepmom had sent me an email, check this person out, and I read about the process. I'm like, okay, you know, that's nice. People are doing, some process, and it seems to be helping. But it wasn't until I was desperate that I actually had a mind that was open to new ideas. So I like this thing about maps of reality in the earlier chapters of your book. You say, in my experience, it is always our maps of reality that are the problem when we disagree. Arguments aren't about reality, they're about our different maps of reality, the stories and meanings we attribute to reality.
Yeah, this is like a really fundamental aspect of my approach to the work, and basically like all the work I do, is this understanding that we each have these individual maps of reality, which are formed by our um, um, all our experience up until now. It's basically how we navigate the world. We learn something about the world, then we use that to navigate by. And how I like to say it is, if a farmer and a geologist and a real estate broker are looking at a plowing field, are they seeing the same thing? And to my mind, it's obvious the question, the answer is no. They're looking at the same thing, but they're not seeing the same thing. The farmer is seeing this nice field where you could plant some wheat. The geologist is seeing an interesting moraine landscape, and the real estate broker is seeing a plot of land where you could put a villa with a view of the bay, right? So they're looking at the same thing, but they're seeing different things because they have very different backgrounds. So they're noticing different things, and that's what we all do. So if I walk through the room, and my mother and my daughter and my wife look at me at the same time walking through the room, they'll see three completely different people, totally different people. I would say luckily it would be weird if if they experience me the same, those three people, but because they have different experiences with me, they will experience me very, very differently. And no one can say who the real Ernest is. Like even my own experience of me is also just a story or a perception filtered through my map of reality. And that's how it works with everything. So if you and I are discussing something, the field, then we will be, if we disagree, it'll not be because we're disagreeing about the field as such. We're disagreeing about our perception of the field. Or if you look at politics, and I mean the U.S. is an amazing example of this right now because the polarization is so intense right now, right? That you could they can look at a former president and see two people that are so there's just like zero overlap between the Trump of the people who support him and the Trump of the people on the other side. It's just like how is that possible? And it's possible because we filter it through these maps of reality. And so a discussion about whether Trump is a good guy or a bad guy makes no sense because it's actually a discussion about maps of reality, and that's my point. And so what one way to say what the work is it's a way to um, uh, change or adjust our map of reality in the areas where it is distorted. Because it's like everything else. If you have a map and there's distortion in the map, then if my map says that the door is there, in reality, the door is over there, then I'll be banging my head against the wall trying to get out there. And I'll never get out until I adjust my map and I see, oh, the door is over there. And then it's easy to walk out. But it's not about where the door is. It's actually about me knowing where the door is or me understanding how things work. And so all of our beliefs are just these building blocks of our maps of reality, and some of them are just really distorted. None of them are true, of course, but some of them are more aligned with reality than others. And and when we have like our idea about reality and reality as it is, there are two choices. And most of us in the beginning try to move reality to align with our idea of reality, which is really hard work because reality is quite resistant to that. And the easier way is to change our idea about reality to become more aligned with reality, and then we can find the door and walk out easy. Um, yeah, so in that gap, that's where all the pain is, all the suffering, all the trauma, all the fear, everything is in the gap between reality and our idea about it.
I've been recently reading some layman lessons in physics and from Feynman, and because he's a very good teacher with some of these weird concepts of quantum physics, and it just there it's field. They're talking about the field, and so I love it. And in the field, the thing about quantum physics, like we don't see reality. There's this whole process of perceiving the field, which is really kind of the it's not a cup, but we see a cup and you see a cup, or you see different. Anyway, so the human awareness and the brain organizes the field into its version of that or story. And correct me if I'm wrong. The way I'm thinking about this is our maps of reality. All right, that is a story. That is our interpretation of reality, and they're all different. And also because of our own limitations, um, we'll say biological to keep it simple. Biological limitations of the human mind and perception, and we're perceiving this, we'll say a quantum field, and trying to organize that amorphous field into some um, arrangement of images that make sense that we can use, right? And I don't want to get too broad here, um, but so in other words, we're really there's so much coming at us, and so the real estate agent looking at the field, and the farmer looking at the field, and the geologist looking at the field, are all looking at that, and they're organizing that field into um, a story, into a narration, or a way of looking at that field, right? That is useful for them, right? Um, but in order to do that, like the geologist needs to see that field, um, and he it's I'm stumbling through this, I realize, but there's a filtering out of a lot of data that's coming in, right? So here's my uh, question: is you were talking about kind of bringing the awareness back into using the door analogy where the door actually is, so bringing it into alignment with what is true. um, and I'm wondering, is it because we're filtering out, is doing the work into finding the turnarounds really expanding the scope of what we're actually taking into account? Can we see more of the field?
Well, I think what happens actually when you post a question like that, what shows up for me is taking in more in a way. Now, this will get a little philosophical, but one of the aspects of quantum physics, of course, is that the particle is not defined in a certain place until you measure on it, right? So its position is undefined until you decide. And I think one way to say what happens as you do the work as a practice for a while, you become less focused on defining stuff. It becomes less important. It's like I'm more open to things just being whatever they are. And so the particle can remain undefined for a longer time. And in that sense, you could say there is a larger scope or a bigger field or a higher degree of openness to things the way they are, and that they can exist in many different ways at the same time without having to be defined. And then if it's required, then you can go in and define it, and then you can let go of that definition again if you need to, and it can become undefined again, and you can again be in a mysterious landscape where things are not so defined. Um, so I think that's how and I would say in the before doing the work, or if you're just normal, normally traumatized by your upbringing, then there can be a tendency to having to or wanting to control things and wanting to define everything and making sure everything is what it is. And you're busy telling others and telling yourself and telling the world what things are. And that sort of relaxes a little bit. But that's like a lot of definitions of, and you're putting all the particles in certain spots and trying to keep them there. And with the work, it just becomes, oh, okay, okay, it was something other than I thought it was. Okay, it's undefined. That's fine. I don't have to have an opinion on this. It can just be what it is.
In the past, mostly I've kind of thought of being open-minded and letting the particle remain a wave or remain amorphous or in many different places at once. It's just like a spiritual value, right? And also, I wouldn't do it if it didn't feel better. So it's also for me to not suffer so much is to be more open and go with the flow. And it could be true, and those are great. Also, there's listening to you, I kind of come to a realization or at least question that there's actually some utility in that openness if you're allowing it having an open mind that doesn't need to have it defined, and that it could be both here and there. And if it can be both here and there, those are new options, right? So it's like so what I hear is like, or what it sounds like to me is that actually this also is a very utilitarian approach to increase creativity,
Yeah,
not just in the
yeah,
artistic sense, but
in
in
life.
problem
Yeah,
solving.
yeah, I totally agree. I've heard Katie say several times, she says like this, she says, never boxed in. And she does this. And she's like, never boxed in. And it's almost like she says it to herself. And I think that's what she's pointing to, that you just don't get boxed in. You can always move. There's always an option to move in some way in relation to the world because you're not stuck on some particular perspective. So that's the creativity. I totally agree. I'm at the moment I'm experimenting with this question. What if there is no limit to how good life can be? And I'm so fascinated by that, and I'm not finding any, and that's just incredible. I'm very pleased with my life as it is, and it just keeps on expanding. And it's like, what if there is no limit? And why would there be a limit? Why would there be a limit to how good life can be? Who should have imposed that limit? But if there isn't, that's just mind blowing. That's if there's no limit to how good life can be, there's never ever you reach a point where now it can't get any better, right? And that requires a bit of that never boxed in quality or that like availability to move creatively with what is. But if you have that, why would there be a limit to it? So yeah, well, I'm digressing a little bit, but I'm really fascinated by that thought at the moment and exploring it and enjoying it. Yeah.
Very fun. All right, so the next one, um, another quote from your book. So back to this experience. This is more of a practical point you share. So the only way to change your map of reality is to have new experiences. but all new experiences are interpreted with old maps. It's natural for your mind to construct your beliefs, but there is no corresponding process to break them down. So, you consciously decide to re examine your past experiences with the work, and putting that in parentheses. So, this is great because there is an abundance of, content on spiritual knowledge or ideas. But, and it's not that they're not useful in my experience, but what you're saying is the experience is far more impactful.
Yeah, yeah. I think the a very important point that I try to make is that, and I sort of talk about the simulator, and I think that's an important element. This notion that what we do when we remember or imagine is that we are simulating reality based on our map of reality. But we are simulating, and that's what we humans can do. We can imagine, in the sense, remember or future project. And and what happens when we do that is we activate the nervous system. Anyone that has had like an important meeting or an exam or something coming up will know what that's like because we start thinking about, let's say it's an exam, we start thinking about the exam, which means that we simulate it, which means that we imagine we are there at that table in that conversation with whoever. And as we imagine that, our body starts to respond as if we were there. And that's the important point, that our bodies, which is our emotions and our nervous system, actually doesn't respond to reality. It responds to our simulation of reality, which is sometimes pretty overlapped. It's always through the filter of the map of reality. But but so if I perceive you as dangerous, if that's what my filter tells me, then then I'm acting on a simulation of you as dangerous, and that's what makes me respond. But that's also when I'm just thinking about future or past. So when we do the work, we can use that to simulate experiences, which will then give us like a new sense of an experience we've had. And that's what opens our nervous system to new configurations. But if we don't step into the simulator and we only do it as an intellectual process, not actually going into the embodied experience and getting our senses active, but just have it as an intellectual thought, then the impact is not very deep in our nervous system. And that's when people say, I did the work, I saw it, I understand, but nothing shifted in me. And that's because they only did it, I call it the little loop, which is just in the head, and not the fully embodied loop, which is that you actually take the meditative approach and take the time to step into that simulator and really experience it. And so one of my points is that when I'm working with people, I don't, when we're going through question 3 and 4, how do you react, what happens, and who would you be without the thought? I don't move people on until I sense that they have actually had the experience in their body of both the pain of believing the thought, but also importantly, and that's what people sometimes skip, the actual experience of who would I be without the thought, which can sometimes be difficult to get to as a simulation. It easily becomes just, well, I would be happy and relaxed and things would be great. And then people move you on. But that's not enough. You need to get in there and really experience what would it feel like to be in that situation without the thought. What does happy and relaxed and great actually feel like? And once you felt it, then we can go on to the turnarounds. If we don't have that embodied impact in the nervous system, then this process will remain a little too intellectual and actually can leave us frustrated because we can get even deeper into that sense of I know what I should do. I've seen it all. I've seen the turnarounds is more true, but every time I'm in the situation, I keep acting with the old system running. But that's because, yeah, from here and down, the old system is still controlling everything. It's just up here that you have this adult awareness. Um, so yeah, the simulator or simulating experience is a unique thing that we humans can do, and we can utilize that in the work. And that seems, to my mind, to be super effective when we do that. It's very human, right? This idea that you sit and you experience discomfort in order to get free from it, it's a little counterintuitive, and it seems much more logical to just never feel it again. But obviously that just doesn't work. I like Gabor Mate. He has a thing. He says that what screws up our lives is not actually the uncomfortable feelings. They are no problem. They're just feelings. The thing that screw up our lives is the coping mechanisms we implement in order to not feel those feelings. That's really the problem, and I think that's so true, and that's why I would say that the master, one of the master tools or the things to really get, if you can become able to be okay with being uncomfortable for just a little bit, if you can be with it and breathe through it, then you can, you know, walk on water basically. Then you can handle so many situations, because the problem is that many situations, or to move in life, requires that we are able to handle discomfort for shorter periods of time. Simple examples are, you know, giving feedback to someone or receiving feedback from someone that is uncomfortable, or just saying no to somebody when they come and ask you can be very uncomfortable for people. Would you do this for me? And if we don't have the capacity to be with the discomfort of saying no, then we say yes as a coping mechanism. But then we are suddenly stuck with all kinds of stuff we don't want to do, and our life goes in the wrong direction. It's a super important ability to be able to say no, and it requires that we are able to be with the discomfort of rejecting or turning someone down, or whatever we call it. And yeah, yeah, that's just so key, to learn to be in discomfort and be okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see that theme coming up more and more. Meaningful discomfort. Um, yeah. Yeah, I'm taking that phrase from a friend of mine, brilliant friend of mine, and and how useful that is as well. Just in a lot of fields, not just in the not just in the spiritual and psychological, but it's like cold plunges, hot yoga. It's like do these things, it's like conditioning the mind to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
yeah,
And
it makes life so much easier.
yeah, there's as you're talking, there's something that came up. It sounds like or as you were saying, you've done quite a bit of investigation into a lot of the well, I'll say wisdom traditions or modalities, and one thing is so interesting to me. So, given our nature is to believe what we think, right? Is to stick with we have an experience, and then we take that as a given, and that is reality, and rarely do we come back to it. Um, to even question that operating system, right? To question that being I don't know if I'm using this word right, but like a epistemological kind of um, thing where it's like the way I know something's true is because I experienced it, right? So I'm just fascinated because I was given it by Byron Katie, and if it wasn't Katie, maybe somewhere else I would have found it. I'm so curious what your thoughts are on how in the hell did somebody come across come to the point of what we should probably look into the given, into questioning the whole operating system of our experiences are true.
Yeah, I think it seems to be something that we can come across, like all traditions that have a practice have come across that in the exploration of the mind.
Mm,
It seems, I mean, the Buddha, the whole concept of Maya, the whole,
yeah,
like all the Hindu ideas of play, it all points to the same thing, that there is some kind of illusion, that we are asleep, that we're dreaming, you know. And I think part of it is to do with this, the farmer and the geologist and the real estate broker looking at the field. We've all experienced how we're looking at the same thing, but we are perceiving different things, and
yeah.
that does bring the whole question of reality into, or the whole matter of reality into question, right? Because
Hmm.
if someone I trust can look at the same thing as me and see something different, then what's true, and how do we determine what's true? So, and as you sit and meditate, or in any way really go into the uh, go inside, whatever that is exactly, you will come across these layers of truth where you can continue to surprise yourself that something else is more true, or at least is not as true as I thought it was.
Yeah.
So I imagine anyone that sits down and examines the mind will come across the same thing, which is part of reality is a construct. And therefore this question will pop up independent of each other. Wherever there is a human nervous system, there is a tendency towards. this being an issue, right?
Yeah.
And all our arguments actually being about that and not about reality, because no one has access to reality. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's just a natural consequence of that's what humans are basically. That's what differentiates us from so many other animals, is that we have this ability
Yeah.
to create illusion.
Right. Yeah. And then right, create the illusion, and then be self-referral to notice that we're creating the illusion, or even the question that we might be creating an illusion.
Yeah, that's yeah. The first step in waking up is dreaming that you're dreaming, right? As some old quote goes. And yeah, that is within our capacity. I think it's different sort of cultures have had different uh, access to realizing this, and I think one challenge, and I don't know how relevant this is. It's just a random thought, but anyway, the monotheistic religions tend to focus very much on one truth, one God, one book, one truth. You know, the three big ones, and and I think that conditions us very much into the idea of a very sort of single-minded or single-eyed view on life,
Yes.
because that was necessary. You couldn't question, the authority of God,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Whereas in other traditions that are more pluralistic, it was more common to say, oh, but this God looks at it from this perspective, but that God looks at it from that perspective. So it was sort of built in that there wasn't one truth. But the whole covenant that we make with the Abrahamic, I think he's called God, with the Ten Commandments, like
Yeah.
you shall have no other gods than me. You shall basically just see life through my prism, and
Yes.
then I will protect you and take care of you. And that's the deal they make.
Yes.
But it sort of left us a little single-minded, and limited in a way in our ability to be relative. And not until actually the modern science, and with Einstein particularly, sort of opened up that idea of relativity, did we get back into this notion in the
Oh
Western
yeah.
tradition, right? There was like 1,500 years or something, or 1,000 years, when we were really just, oh, there's only one way to understand everything, and we'll burn the people who don't agree. Simple, obvious.
That's very
Yeah.
cool. I never thought of that Einstein might have been the one. Obviously, he brought relativity in the scientific community, but also within just well, I'll say spiritual, or our own thinking. So
No, no, to me it's like a two-punch thing. First Copernicus, and the idea that the Earth is not the center of the universe,
yeah,
which was shocking because that was how the whole thing was set up. That was like
yeah,
the first punch.
yeah,
And then when Einstein brought this whole idea that everything depends on where you are, that took that to an even higher
yeah,
degree, that okay, so we're really experiencing everything differently. And of course it was a matter of speed and movement and gravity, but in a philosophical sense it was picked up, and the earth, the Western world was just ripe for this kind of perspective, and eventually God just went out the window in large parts of the Western world,
mm,
um, based on that. And interestingly, I see that, um, again, in looking at the U.S., there's like a return a little bit to this single-minded focus in the whole like book banning, and
mm,
this whole, it's as if what we said before, that this uh, uh, that these different views on Trump, we can say, or that the world has become so polarized, and we're so different, that the relativity of the thing has become too much in a way. And one response is to say, okay, it really is relative, so let's let it go. But
mm-hmm.
there's another psychological response, which is, no, let's just decide that something is the truth, and
Yes,
defend that at all cost, and not even listen, because we just want, so let's burn the books, so to speak, that are not supporting our perspective. Let's ridicule those that have another perspective, and it's going on both sides of the political arena, it seems, in the US, but also in other areas. I mean, yeah, dictatorships all over the world, of course, leans towards just one truth, and yeah, I personally I find that to be uh, challenging, I totally trust the process, and I would love it to be a little less bumpy in that area, because I think there is some unnecessary suffering caused by these fixed ideas about truth. And does unnecessary suffering exist? Probably not. But that's my human heart.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I too would prefer it not so bumpy. Um, and my optimistic viewpoint is like, well, this is a collective dilemma, collective paradox, and also and so what's good about that is that seems to be how there is evolution, as it happens in these dialectic relationships of two opposites, and then there's a synthesis, and but also, yeah, it's not like, what I do understand, it's not a given that we will not regress back to
definitely.
some central
Yeah,
authoritarian kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, definitely. And now maybe
Yeah.
the new authority will be some AI, and then the problem is solved. So we'll see what
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
brings. But yeah. No, it's
Yeah.
not a given. It's not a given for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever's next. I'm happy I have the work. And back to, we were talking about being uncomfortable. So in the worksheet, as you're very familiar, the last one is, what is it about that stressful situation, that thing that is the worst, that you would just never want to experience again. And then the turnaround for that last one is, as you know, I'm willing to experience that again. And I look forward to experiencing it again. And that is also just, uh, you know, that is like a trickster, archetypal trickster move, which I love because it just is the beautiful setup for, like, that thing that you want to avoid at all costs. What if we did the opposite? And what would life be like if you just did the opposite approach, where you actually just look forward to that thing that you really don't like? And and just even that, how would that change everything? You know, um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there is an important aspect of that, which is also, you know, our minds. Like one of the ways we operate, we make these decisions or conclusions early on in life that something is very important, like we have to always say yes, or we have to placate others, or be a pleaser, or whatever kind of thing we think is the truth at 4 years old, and then we run that program for the rest of our lives. And one of the ways, unless we question it, and one of the ways our minds or our systems keep us in line with that is to show us these scary ideas about what will happen if we don't. So you have to say yes, because if you say no, then it'll flash some image, usually from the past, of something terrible that happened because we said no, and then we don't want to have that again, do we? Oh no, we better say yes, right? And that's like it's for me, it's like an electric fence. We touch the fence, and then oh no, we step back, like we can't go across that and go into this new uncharted territory because the fence is too dangerous. But what I like about the number six, I'm willing and I look forward to, is that that sort of calls the mind's bluff. Because if it shows you that image of, oh, this will happen, and if you then go, yeah, I'm willing for that to happen, let's do that. I look forward to that. Let's see what that's like. Then it loses the power. Then the electric fence just disappears, and you're free to wander into this other field where you might discover huge treasures, right? So it's also, there's the approach of the future or whatever, but that's all an illusion. It's really just in the now that I see this image of the future, and then by being open to anything, then that falls away, and I can be present again with just what is right now, just moving forward, maybe wandering into a new field, and that's fine. No big deal. So yeah, I also think it's a very skillful little extra layer that has been added on that number six. I agree.
So here's, what I like about the work is, all I need to do in my life is just notice what hurts or what makes me uncomfortable, right? I don't have to stay on it. I don't have to follow a program. I don't have to remember to do anything, right? It's like I've just kind of, it's a trusting the process kind of thing, but there is a process. In other words, it's not fully willy nilly. It's like, no, the process is when I notice something stresses me out, makes me angry or afraid or sad, then my process is to inquire into it. And so it's not like the work is a truth. It's actually more like a principle, right? So it's like it's higher than a value. It's higher than a fact. It's a principle, and the principle is that you just honestly inquire into the thing that hurts.
Yeah, yeah. And there is even an undercutting, which is if you want it to stop hurting, right? Because that's not even a given. It's just this is just one way to do it. If you want to get out of suffering, here is one way to do it. But there's no demand that you do it. There's no requirement. There's no expectation. You won't get punished if you don't. It's just, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. Okay. Well, here's how you can do it, and you don't have to. Yeah. Mm, I would say there are two layers to that. One is uh, the mind's willingness to let go of its perspective, which is like the belief we have, the one-liner we believe is the perspective we're starting in. And if we've really experienced, first of all, maybe it's not even true, and really felt that, is it true? No. And we felt the pain of holding on to it and a release of some kind in imagining life without it. Then there is an openness in our system. It's not as defensively holding on. It's like, oh, maybe this is actually a bad idea to believe this thought. So the deeper that experience is, the more there's a readiness to say, let's see if we can find a better perspective on this. So there's a less defensiveness or less clinging. So that's like an emotional element to it. And then the other thing is, especially in the beginning when you're new to the work, it can be and your mind is used to your identity depending on you holding on to certain perspectives and beliefs. Then the turnarounds can be quite challenging to find examples of. Because it sort of brings so much into question. So all the tendency is to just stay with what you know. So for people who are new to the work, especially, it can be difficult to find examples of turnarounds. But where you actually can, when you have difficulties finding examples, where you should look is especially in question 3. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? If you go deep there, you actually find all the material you need. Then when you get to the turnarounds, it's just picking some elements out of that. So as an example, if my belief is, he's talking bad about me, right? And I go really deep in that. In question 3, one of the things I'll discover as I look at how do I react, what happens when I believe he's talking bad about me, is I notice what I'm saying about him in my mind. I'm saying, he's an idiot. He's not highly evolved enough. He should be much kinder. His heart is closed, all kinds of stuff like that. And and then when I get to the turnaround, I'm talking bad about him. Then I've already seen all the ways I talk bad about him. So it's very easy for me because it all came out clearly when I was looking at how do I react, what happens. So if you skip that, if you just, how do you react? Well, I get annoyed and I get frustrated with him and I go to my room. Then when you get to the turnaround, I talk bad about him. You're only starting there to start to look at what are you actually doing in your mind. So that's why I say, if you have difficulties with finding examples of turnarounds, just go deeper in question 3. Spend more time in question 3. Discover more because it'll all be there, and then it's just served on a silver platter once you get.
I think I said one last quote. Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
Because I missed this one. I had this whole list, and um, so this is pretty genius. So you quote, you can't let go of your beliefs or change your map of reality. It's impossible, but you can question them and examine them with an open mind. And where you find your map is off, the beliefs lose their hold on you. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. It's not about actively installing new beliefs or trying to reprogram our unconscious mind through affirmation or suggestion. It's about seeing for yourself by examining with an open mind. You are working with a system, not against it. Your system is designed to create a map based on experiences. So when your experiences change, your map of reality changes too. You exploit the functions already inherent in you. I love that. That is a fantastic point.
Yeah, that really is one thing I love about the work is that it's not about a new doing. It's not about you now, what do I do next time or anything. It's about trusting that what you've seen can't be unseen and that the shift that happens will, of course, remain there because your system has seen something more intelligent. It's not going to forget that. It's going to
Yeah.
stay with that.
Yeah.
Uh, and so next time, so there it's I think Katie said there's a quote from Katie which is like something about the work is not about doing, it's about awareness or something. And it's the same point. It's simply that you become aware and then it shifts, then it happens. You don't
Yeah.
have to do anything else.
Yeah.
If you feel you have to do something, which is why I have a little bit of an issue with the living turnaround thing. And, you know, they can arise spontaneously, and that's great.
Hmm.
But then they arise, we don't need to put a word to them. When it's turned into something I do, it feels to me a little bit off. It's yeah, because I love the non-doing.
Hmm.
That the work is an undoing
Hmm.
of our beliefs. It's not a new doing. It's not adding something on top.
Yeah.
And I find that to be one of the most powerful elements of self-inquiry. This goes very clearly in the work, but it actually goes in all kinds of inquiry processes from all traditions and all things. Once you really see something, it just you step out into the world in a new way.
Yeah.
And that is working with the system because that's what the system is made for. You know, you put your hand on a warm what's it called where you fry where you put your frying pan
Stovetop.
stove. Yeah, you put it on a hot stove and you learn it immediately. There's no I have to do it 1,000 times or I have to remember it or I have to move this
Right.
elastic band from one hand to the other, write it down or affirmations. That's how quickly our system can learn. It's not even for a second you have your hand on that and it'll not put your hand there again ever.
Yeah.
So that's how fast our capacity for learning new stuff is, and that's what we're using in these inquiry processes, including in the work.
Right. I'm not trying to change me. I'm actually working with me.
Yeah, for sure.
And that just feels better, honestly.
It's non-violent, right? It's
Right.
it's 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 an organic approach of just setting things free, and then they'll find their way into a more balanced state,
Yeah.
simply. But it does live its own life, the mind.
Yeah.
It's not us. It really isn't. We are something apart from our thinking processes.
Yeah.
That's so clear. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then I probably should have led with that. That's a very good fundamental building block is just and something you um, talk about I think right away in the book is that we're not our thoughts. We're noticing the thoughts.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's like in the journey of the practice of the work. I think there's a very important thing that happens at some point when this really lands in us that we can stand somewhere other than on the island of our thinking, that there is an other place to stand and we can observe our thinking from there. And your initial question about NLP and this observation of ourselves really becomes much easier once we have established that I am something other than my thinking, because then it's safe to look at the thinking and adjust the thinking and question the thinking. But when I think I am the thinking, then of course, questioning my thinking is questioning myself and everything I am, and that feels very dangerous.
Yes.
So and over time in the work, you sooner or later this becomes evident to you, and from then on, it's much more downhill. It's a much easier journey
Hmm.
because now I can just observe myself, and it's like and these days it's so fun. I mean I can have conversations about myself, like I can share honestly what's going on in me in some situation, and it doesn't feel threatening because let me tell you what Ernest just thought. Right? That's I wouldn't phrase it like that, but it's almost that way it feels like, oh, I want to share something funny. I just had the thought that something which would be embarrassing or cringeworthy or terrible when I thought that was me thinking it.
Yes.
But when I can see it's just this random process of associations and stuff and trauma, and then it's just, oh, let's look at this together. Isn't that fun?
Yes.
And it's so liberating. And that's where the radical honesty stuff comes in as well.
Mm.
It's so liberating to just be transparent.
Yes.
Nothing to defend, nothing to hold back on. It's just, here's Ernest. And it's not, I'm okay. I'm okay. We can talk about him and reveal him and still be okay.
Yes.
Um, in more and more areas until eventually it's just, yeah, this is what's going on. It's just the body mind mechanism running its thing, and I'm okay.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
can be uncomfortable as well, and I'm okay because I'm apart from that discomfort as well, right? It's the whole thing that I
Right.
stand apart from. Yeah.
It's just I haven't sat to think of the words, but it is really quite something to just notice how, and I still do it to a large degree, but just to notice how when I was younger, which um, was just yesterday, kind of, it's very much believing that I needed to hold on to this construct. That was me, and it was the most valuable, precious thing, and it needed to be defended.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think that's also part of this whole notion of life just getting better and better. Stepping into that second half, it- compared to the joys of the first half, which was great. It was great to build stuff and accomplish things and stuff, but it was always, suffused or whatever the word is with this anxiety and this tension around all of it.
Yeah.
And to begin to deconstruct that and undo all of that stuff is just like, oh, um, I remember from Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching, how he translates one of the verses is, in the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the
Mm.
pursuit of the Tao, every day something is dropped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Less and less do you need to force things until finally you end at non-doing. When
Yeah.
nothing is done, nothing is left undone. And I love that description of just, yeah, letting go every day of something more.
Yes. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and then that's a perfect segue into my last curiosity, which is you also do coaching, right? And coaching is, I would say, um, classically would be in the constructive column, right? It's I want to do something or be something better than I am, or and I've done some coaching over the last few years, just part time, nothing too serious, and I've really kind of wrestled with this um, dilemma between the taking away and the deconstructing and the constructing. And I'd love to hear what your philosophy is on that.
When I use the word coaching, uh, it has to do with a difficulty of explaining exactly what I do. Because if I say to people I'm a facilitator, especially in Danish, that's difficult to understand. It's not a word that we use very much. And coach is very sort of commonly known. And I have a lot of clients who do not particularly come to me because I do the work. They come to me because they know something happens when people talk to me. So, and they don't care whatever I do, they just want the result. And coaching is a much easier uh, term to use for what I do. It's recognizable. It's not therapy. It's like I support you in whatever you're doing. And I do have quite a lot of uh, interactions with people who are more in that constructive column, as you beautifully put it. And it's about, it's work related. It's about how do I solve this problem with this person, or how do I make this change in my um, group of employees, or stuff that has to do with actually not just introspectively finding freedom, but doing something out there in the so-called reality. And and I would say how I live my life myself, of course, is that I do things in the world, and they're all informed or based on these insights that come from the work and spirituality and all of that stuff. So when I am coaching somebody, even if it's a very specific thing that is like more in the coaching paradigm of figuring out some actions to take, then the tendency in those actions would be towards, you know, uh, the very obvious stuff, which would be like, well, have you told her that you're bothered by the way she does that? Oh, no, no, I haven't. No, I didn't. My God, that would be okay. What's keeping you from just saying it? Because really, I think the problem, the way we cause problems for ourselves is not so much in what we do as it's in what we that we don't do what would be obvious because of these limitations in our maps of reality or our belief system or whatever we call it. So my coaching is really about taking away the things that inhibits the natural thing to do, which would for most people be to just say it if something's bothering them, right? But we have so many things that hold us back, and that becomes almost therapeutic because often the reason why we're not saying it are these strategies from childhood or these trauma or whatever we call it. So a lot of my coaching actually goes to looking at like, why wouldn't you just say it? Well, because then they'll be upset with me, and okay, what's wrong with being someone being upset with you? Well, that's terrible. Okay, where did you learn that that was terrible? Well, my attachment figures from childhood, my parents, I would never do anything to make them upset with me because then I would be sent to my room or whatever. Okay, so that's why you're not saying it to her. And then we dismantle that, and then the task until next time is, say it and let's see what happens. And then they will come next time and they will either have said it and have gained some insight, or still not said it because something else is in the way of doing it, and then we can work on that. So my coaching is not so much let's make it a 5 point plan and let's execute. It's more let's strip away the stuff that's in the way and then let life flow freely.
Well, thank you so much. It's
Thank you.
this has been a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah. And I always ask, how can people find you?
Oh, yeah. My website is the thing, theartofbeinghuman.com. That's the name of my company, and it's my website. And I would say, my podcasts are a good resource to listen to if you want to know more about the work and my particular take on the work. And there you can also find, yeah, videos and all sorts of stuff. And I do retreats and one-on-one sessions and yeah, plenty of things. But it's all on the website. So
Awesome.
theartofbeinghuman.com. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of good resources there. Wonderful. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Gabe.